Hello, it's Jim Hutchins for the Jerusalem Connection Truth Report on this Wednesday, the second day of August, 2017. Yesterday was the first day of August, and on the Jewish calendar it was the 9th day of Av, Tisha B'Av. And it's a day when they remember many of the great catastrophes that have faced the Jewish people over the years on this date. And it seems like that's not been a good date for the Jewish people in their history. There's an editorial in the Jerusalem Post that speaks to this. I want to read excerpts from it. It's entitled Tisha B'Av Lessons that the Jews have or should have learned from Tisha B'Av. Jews lost their sovereignty, the article begins. There is no surety that this will not happen again. During the long centuries of exile, the Tisha B'Av focus was loss. Jewish communities throughout the diaspora were united in this day of mourning, the end of Jewish sovereignty. God allowing sovereign control over the land. With the return of Jews to the land, the central message of the day should shift from remorse for what was to realization that history can repeat itself. Jews lost their sovereignty, and there's no surety that this will not happen again. Saul Bellow expressed this idea to Jerusalem back in 1976 when he said, quote, "There is one fact of Jewish life that is unchanged by the creation of the Jewish state. Namely, you cannot take your right to live for granted. Others can, you cannot. It's not to say that everyone else living in pleasantly and well under a defined regime. No, it only means that the Jews, because they are Jews, have never been allowed to take the right to live as a natural right. To be sure, many Israelis refuse to admit that this historic uneasiness has not been eliminated. They seem to think of themselves as a fixed power, immovable. Their point has been made. They are a nation among nations and will always remain so." And Bellow concludes, "You must tear your mind away from this conviction, as you must tear it from civilized appearances in order to reach reality." The article goes on, as the recent upheaval surrounding the Temple Mount demonstrates, Israel continues to face major challenges to their sovereignty. Israel's many enemies will not go away anytime soon. 50 years of unified Jerusalem has not convinced the world of Israel's immovability. Tisha B'Av teaches us that the destructive forces that can lead a once unified nation to turn upon itself, its sovereignty being challenged. And as Rabbi Jonathan Sachs noted in a recent talk, he said, quote, "The only people that will save us from ourselves is we, the people, all of us together." And then he says this, "No leader, no strong leader will do the job for us, not even a Messiah." Not even a Messiah. Now that goes against totally what the Scripture says. As a matter of fact, it will only be through the Messiah that the Jewish people are preserved. And that'll come about, an intervention by the Messiah, by Yahweh, represented by the Messiah, when Zechariah's prophecy in Zechariah chapter 12, verse 10 is fulfilled. Yahweh says, "I will pour out on the house of David and on the inhabitants of Jerusalem a spirit of grace and supplication." Grace from God, sanctifying, saving grace from God, supplication, earnest prayer on the part of God's people to Yahweh. "I will pour out on the house of David and the inhabitants of Jerusalem a spirit of grace and supplication. They will look on me," the Scripture says. "They will look on me, the one they have pierced." Who is that? That's none other than Jesus, our Messiah. "They will look on me whom they have pierced, and they will mourn for him as one mourns for an only child, and as one grieves bitterly for the firstborn son. That has to happen. He says in chapter 13, on that day a fountain will be opened, a fountain of saving, sustaining, sanctifying grace. A fountain will be opened to the house of David and the inhabitants of Jerusalem to cleanse them from sin and impurity. Contrary to what Rabbi Sachs has said, it will only be when the Messiah comes that the Jewish people will be preserved. It will be divine intervention of Yahweh through his son Yeshua HaMashiach. And that's the truth.